They never told you the truth. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too dangerous. You gave your all, you were kind, you were honest, you believed love was enough. But she left anyway, without warning, without closure, and you were left staring at your phone, wondering what you did wrong. Maybe you begged. Maybe you explained yourself again and again. Maybe you thought, if I can just get her to understand, everything will go back to the way it was. But it didn't. And no one gave you an answer. Here's the part they never teach you in school, in therapy, or in your friend's advice. She didn't leave because you weren't enough. She left because you stopped being strong, not physically, emotionally. And there's a reason this knowledge was buried for centuries. Because once a man understands how emotion truly works, once he sees through the fantasy of unconditional love, he becomes something dangerous. Not to her, but to the system that needs him confused. There's a mirror from the ancient world, one Aristotle held up, and what he saw they erased. But it's time we bring it back, because the truth, it won't fix your past, but it might just save your future. Thank you for being here. And I hope you stay until the end, because what you're about to hear might change how you see everything. They say history is written by the victors, but sometimes it's edited by the fearful. There was a truth once, whispered through the marble halls of Athens, a truth so piercing, so uncomfortably clear they chose to bury it, not because it was wrong, but because it gave men too much clarity, too much independence, too much power. Aristotle, the man you know as the father of logic, he didn't just write about ethics or syllogisms. He watched people. He dissected emotion. He observed the quiet storms inside human nature. And one day he wrote something that shattered the room. He said, "The female is, as it were, a deformed male." Today that line is labeled as offensive, dismissed, canceled. But that's because most people never read what came next. They never asked what he meant. They never tried to understand the mirror he was holding. Aristotle wasn't angry at women. He wasn't trying to dominate anyone. He was trying to protect men from misunderstanding emotion. Because he saw what emotion could do, he watched men drown not in failure, but in feelings they couldn't decode. He saw that women don't operate on the same internal compass. They are tuned into signals most men don't even know exist. They respond to energy, not logic, to presence, not promises, to strength, not explanation. And he realized if a man tries to love a woman the way he wishes to be loved, through facts, through clarity, through loyalty alone, he's bound to be hurt. But this wasn't just a message for relationships. It was a call for masculine awareness, a warning to stop projecting logic onto a world ruled by energy. And it was dangerous, because once a man stops chasing feelings, once he begins leading himself, he becomes less marketable, less controllable, less dependent on approval. They couldn't let that idea spread, so they burned the scrolls, they censored the teachings, they called it archaic, misogynistic, outdated, but in truth they were terrified. Because Aristotle didn't give men hate, he gave them a lens, he gave them a map not to rule women, but to rule themselves. And when a man masters himself, he no longer falls for the illusion. He no longer fears silence. He no longer mistakes her attention for his worth. And that kind of man is dangerous, not to society, but to the lie that says your emotions must be validated by someone else. So ask yourself, what if the thing that hurt you was never her, but the illusion you believed in all along? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And from there, your clarity begins. Michael Reed wasn't always this quiet. He used to smile more. He used to text back with long messages, full of warmth, full of hope. He believed in forever. Not because he was naive, but because he thought love, when real, stayed. He met her on a cold December night. Anna, her laugh lit something in him. She was playful, magnetic, unpredictable, everything he wasn't, everything he thought he needed. Michael gave her his time, his thoughts, his heart. He listened when she vented, held her when she cried, canceled plans to be there, told her she was his world. And for a while, it felt mutual. She called him her rock, her safe place. She said, "You're the only one who gets me." So when she started pulling away, he panicked. First, it was the shorter replies, then the "I'm tired" texts, then the silence, the ghosting, the confusion. Michael didn't yell, he didn't accuse, he wrote her a letter, long, thoughtful, honest. He said, "Tell me what I did wrong." He said, "I'll fix it." He said, "I just want to understand." But the message stayed on read. No answer, no explanation. Just cold air and 1,000 spinning questions. Michael stopped sleeping. He replayed every conversation. He asked himself, was I too much? Was I not enough? What changed? And one night, sitting in his parked car, staring at a photo of them smiling, he broke, not from heartbreak, but from not knowing, because that's what hurts most, not the leaving, but the not understanding. And that's when he found the quote, a line by Aristotle, about the emotional world, the one no one ever prepared him for. He didn't get angry, he got curious, because maybe it wasn't about blame, maybe it was about blindness. A blindness passed down by fathers who never spoke, by schools that never taught, by movies that sold a dream. Michael realized he was taught how to be kind, how to listen, how to commit, but never how to lead himself, never how to hold frame when storms came, never how to decode the emotional world of the woman he loved. So that night, something cracked, not his heart, his illusion. And when an illusion dies, clarity is born. If you've ever been here, if you've ever stared at the read receipt, heart racing, mind spiraling, if you've ever wondered what went wrong, just know this: you're not alone, you're not broken. You were just never told that love in her world isn't about words, it's about energy. And once Michael saw that, his journey didn't end, it began. There's a silent assumption every man carries, that emotion is unpredictable, that women are emotional, that love should make sense if it's real. But what if the confusion isn't in her? What if it's in the lens you were given? Aristotle didn't see chaos when he looked at women. He saw rhythm. He saw signals. He saw patterns that no one wanted to name. He wrote that women are moved not by logic, but by motion. Not by facts, but by feeling. And here's the part they never told you: her behavior isn't random, it's reactive, reactive to energy, to tone, to presence, to what's unsaid. You may think she left because of what you said, but it was more often because of what you stopped being. You stopped being grounded. You started chasing. You shifted your core from calm to panic, and she felt it. Because women, they don't read texts, they read the current behind them. Michael used to believe his words mattered most, that if he just explained himself well enough, she'd come back, that if he wrote one more honest message, she'd see how much he cared. But each message he pushed her further, not because he was wrong, but because he was leaking energy. He was trying to fix emotion with intellect. And emotion doesn't bend to logic, it shifts with presence. Think of emotion like the wind. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't stay the same. And you can't argue with it. So what did Aristotle do? He didn't try to stop the wind. He studied its direction. He observed what stirred it, what calmed it, what made it vanish. And he noticed something profound. When a man stands still, emotionally anchored, the storm around him changes, not because he forced it, but because his steadiness created a contrast. And women, being attuned to energy, they feel that. Michael started seeing it too. Moments when he pulled back his need to be understood and just breathed. Moments where her chaos softened, simply because he didn't join it, not with coldness, but with centered calm. She still didn't reply, but his heart stopped racing. His mind stopped spiraling. And for the first time in weeks he slept. Because emotional clarity isn't about fixing her. It's about seeing the pattern and stepping outside the loop. Once you do that, you stop asking, what's wrong with her, and start asking, where am I anchored? Because you can't lead anyone until you learn to lead yourself. There's a moment every man remembers. She looks you in the eye, says, I'm fine, and turns away. And everything inside you screams she's not. But you were taught to believe words, so you take it at face value, you back off, you give space. You wait for logic to return, except it never does. Because in her world, I'm fine rarely means peace. It means something's wrong, but she needs to feel you feel it, not just hear her say it. You think, if she wanted to talk, she would. If something was wrong, she'd just say it. If she loved me, she wouldn't shut down like this. But that's where most men lose the map. You see, in her world, silence is a test, distance is a signal, and love isn't proven by logic, it's proven by presence. Michael didn't know that either. So when Anna went quiet, he tried to fix it the only way he knew. He asked what was wrong. He offered comfort. He explained how much he loved her. But she didn't soften, she pulled further. Because every word he spoke felt like a plea. She didn't feel his strength, she felt his fear. And fear, no matter how kind, is not attractive. So Michael chased, not physically, but emotionally. He gave more than was asked. He reassured without being doubted. He apologized without being accused. And in doing so, he confirmed her unspoken worry that he was not steady. See, what she needed was not his explanation. It was his calm, not his effort, his edge. Because women test not to hurt but to feel safe, to feel the strength behind your words, the unshakable core beneath your kindness. And if you crumble under her silence, if you beg during her withdrawal, you fail the test she never admitted giving, not because you're weak, but because you don't understand how emotion speaks. This is where Michael kept failing, not from lack of love, but from lack of leadership. He was trying to be heard when he needed to be still. It's counterintuitive. You want to reach out, but true power comes from restraint, from trust, from knowing your worth isn't tied to her reaction. The day Michael stopped explaining was the day he passed his first silent test, not because she replied, but because he no longer needed her to. And that shift was the beginning of everything. If you've ever chased clarity from a woman who withdrew only to be met with more distance, you already know the pain. But now maybe you also know the pattern, and patterns can be broken. If this moment feels familiar, if you've spoken into silence, hoping for her to care, just drop a comment below, say, "Me too." Let someone else out there know they're not crazy. They're just learning a new language, the language of emotion spoken in energy and heard through presence. And when you stop arguing with the storm, you start becoming the sky. There's a test she never says out loud, a test she might not even know she's giving. It's the moment she withdraws, not to punish, but to feel something deeper, to feel who you really are when she's not validating you. And most men, they fail this test, not because they're bad, but because they panic. Michael did too. After days of silence, he couldn't take it anymore. He messaged her again, not angry, just desperate. "Are we okay? Did I do something wrong? Please talk to me." Each word a thread unraveling his center, each message a confirmation that he needed her more than she needed him. And that's the test, not the question she asks, but the emotion she stirs, not the silence she gives, but how you hold yourself in it. Michael didn't know that, so he did what he was taught. He opened up, he expressed his feelings, he tried to be emotionally available. But here's the brutal truth. When a woman tests your strength, vulnerability won't always save you. Sometimes it exposes you. Because in that moment she's not listening to your heart. She's scanning your spine. She's feeling for the man beneath your words. And if your vulnerability comes from fear, she feels that, not your openness. But your collapse, Michael kept failing that test. Over and over he thought, if I just show her how much I care, she'll stop pulling away. But each time he reached out, she moved further. Because tests don't end with words, they end with stillness, with grounded silence, with you holding your line. And when Michael finally stopped texting, stopped explaining, stopped chasing, it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he started to care for something else. His clarity, his peace, his power. He sat with the discomfort, the not knowing, the ache, and in that stillness he passed. She didn't come running back, not right away, but something in him shifted, a knowing, a calm, a kind of silent pride, because for the first time he didn't need her to validate him, he validated himself. And in that moment her test ended, not because he won her back, but because he stopped needing to. You see, the hardest part of these tests is they feel personal, but they're not. They're ancient, they're primal, they're written in the language of attraction, not intention. So if you've been failing, you're not broken. You're just learning the rules they never told you. And once you learn them, you stop dancing for approval and start walking in presence. That's the moment the tests stop, not because she changes, but because you do. There's a moment in every man's life when the silence stops being a punishment and starts becoming a teacher. For Michael, that moment came on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic, no call, no closure, just the same unread message sitting there, and something inside him whispered, "Stop." Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of exhaustion. He looked in the mirror and didn't see a lover. He saw a shadow, a man shaped by someone else's moods, a man waiting for permission to feel okay again. And in that moment he realized he was tired of waiting, tired of chasing, tired of asking, "Am I enough?" When deep down he already was. So he did something radical. He turned his phone off, not to manipulate, but to disconnect from the need to be needed. He went to the gym, not to impress, but to remember how strength felt. He called an old friend, not to distract, but to reconnect with who he was before the confusion. He walked, breathed, sat with the ache, and let it burn without flinching. And that was the moment he chose himself, not as a rebellion, but as a return. Because choosing yourself doesn't mean giving up on love. It means refusing to abandon your center for it. It means being okay even if she doesn't reply. It means knowing that your peace is not hers to grant or take away. And the strangest thing happened as he got quieter. She noticed, not his words, his absence. The energy shifted, not because he pulled back to trigger her, but because he no longer needed a reaction. That's the paradox. The moment you stop needing her to come back is the moment she starts feeling you differently. Because now you're not chasing, you're leading, not her yourself. She texted 2 days later, a short, hesitant hey. But this time Michael didn't feel a surge of hope. He felt calm, he read it and breathed. No rush to reply, no story to tell. No fantasy to fall into, because this wasn't about winning her back. It was about not losing himself again. He responded when he was ready, with warmth, but without seeking, and that tone, that quiet confidence, that centered energy, she felt it. And for the first time she didn't test, she listened. Because Michael wasn't trying to convince her anymore. He was simply being. If you've ever hit that wall, where trying harder only made things worse, maybe this is your invitation, not to give up, but to come back to the part of you that doesn't beg, that doesn't chase, that doesn't explain your worth. If you're still here, maybe you're ready to stop spinning in her storm and start building your own sky. There's a kind of power that doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't posture, it doesn't chase validation, it just is. And that's what Michael stepped into. The shift was subtle. He didn't become colder, he became clearer. He didn't start playing games, he stopped playing himself. Because when a man leads himself, his energy speaks before his mouth does. She noticed, not just in texts, but in his tone, his timing, his rhythm. He wasn't rushing to reassure. He wasn't walking on emotional eggshells. He was calm, not because he didn't care, but because he cared differently now. And that's when her behavior changed. Not because he manipulated it, but because she felt something new, a groundedness, a quiet certainty, a vibe that said, I don't need you to act a certain way for me to stay centered. And that's rare because most men react, they over-explain, they over-apologize, they overgive. But Michael, he held his line, he gave from abundance, not from fear. When she said, I miss you, he didn't light up with desperation, he smiled. Not because he didn't feel, but because he wasn't owned by the feeling. She tested again, subtly, a delayed response, a cryptic comment, a shift in tone, and this time he didn't flinch, not because he didn't notice, but because he no longer danced to her rhythm, he moved to his own. And in that moment she softened, not because he forced it, but because she felt safe. That's the irony. When you're unshakable, she feels held, not by control, but by consistency, not by dominance, but by direction. Women don't follow words, they follow presence. They respond to the energy you carry even in silence. So when Michael stopped chasing her emotions, she started trusting his energy, because he became the anchor and she the tide. And the tide doesn't follow commands, it follows gravity. Michael had become that, not heavy, but steady, not forceful, but felt. And for the first time he wasn't trying to win love, he was living in alignment. If you've ever wondered, how do I get her to stop testing me? The answer is this: you don't. You stop failing the test by leading yourself, by mastering your vibe, by becoming so deeply rooted that her emotional waves can crash, but never move your core. When that happens, the game ends, not because she surrenders, but because she finally feels she can. Why didn't anyone teach you this? Why did you go your whole life believing that love means giving more, explaining harder, feeling less like a man and more like a caretaker? Because if you knew the truth, you wouldn't be so easy to control. That's the part no one wants to say. Because a man who's emotionally clear can't be manipulated by guilt, can't be sold fantasies, can't be baited into proving his worth. So what did they do instead? They told you to be nice, to be soft, to be endlessly understanding, to never walk away, to chase her emotions like a dog chasing a car even if it runs him into traffic. They told you, real men don't give up. Real men fight for her. Real men fix it. But they never told you this. Real men don't lose themselves trying to be enough. Real men don't become emotional janitors, cleaning up messes they didn't make just to feel needed. Michael believed the lie too. He thought if he just kept giving, she'd finally feel safe. That if he bent enough, she'd stop breaking. That if he changed himself, she'd stay the same. But all it did was make him disappear. Because that's what happens when you abandon yourself for love. You lose the one thing she was drawn to in the first place, your edge, your gravity, your center. And here's the uncomfortable truth. They don't want you to have that center, not just women, but culture, the system, the algorithms. They all feed on your confusion. Because a man who's confused buys more, proves more, pleads more. He becomes predictable, soft, reactive, easy. But a man who understands the emotional code, who sees the patterns, who feels the shifts without reacting, he's dangerous, not in a violent way, but in a free way, because that man can't be guilted into staying. He can walk away without collapsing. He can hold space without shrinking. And that's terrifying to a world that profits off your pain. So they buried this knowledge, they mocked it, they labeled it toxic, and they fed you a version of masculinity that was either silent or servile. But Aristotle saw it differently. He didn't hate women, he studied them, and through them he discovered something about men. That emotional leadership isn't about controlling anyone. It's about mastering the one person you're responsible for. Michael saw that now. He wasn't angry, he wasn't bitter, he was awake. Because once the illusion breaks, you don't go back, you don't need her to approve, you don't need the system to clap, you just lead from within with clarity, with stillness, with presence. And in that space, love, the real kind, has room to breathe, because it's not being chased, it's being chosen, not by her, by you. Most men don't realize they're following until they stop walking in circles. That was Michael's life before the shift, reacting, pleasing, explaining, trying to stabilize her moods by destabilizing himself. He thought love meant fixing things, but real love doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be felt from a place of clarity, not chaos. That's what he learned when he stopped asking, "What does she want?" and started asking, "Where am I leading from?" Because here's the truth, you either lead your energy or you get led by hers. And when her emotions swing, if you swing with them, you become a mirror, not a man. But when you hold your energy steady, she feels it. Even if she doesn't say it, especially when she doesn't say it. Michael used to live in reaction. If she was cold, he got warmer. If she pulled away, he leaned in. If she cried, he collapsed. Now he breathes, he listens. He notices the storm and stays the sky, not distant, not robotic, but rooted. He stopped solving feelings, started observing them. He stopped rushing to reply, started speaking from stillness. And slowly she began to relax, because she no longer felt the weight of his emotional need. She felt the space to just be. That's what leadership looks like, not control, not silence, but grounded presence. You don't need to dominate, you don't need to convince. You just need to be clear inside yourself. So when the tests come, when the moods shift, when the silence returns, you're not triggered. You're tuned in, not to her behavior, but to your balance. And the moment you master that, you stop being pulled around, you stop asking, "Why is she doing this?" And you start asking, "Who am I being right now?" Because energy leads, words follow. If you're tired of over-explaining, if you're exhausted from chasing clarity that never comes, if you're done begging to be seen, then let this be the moment you pause, reset, lead, not to control her, but to command yourself. Drop a comment if this hits. Say, "I'm done chasing." Not for me, for you, because once you claim that, you don't just change your relationships, you change your life. Michael never got the closure he thought he needed. No final conversation, no apology, no long paragraph that made it all make sense. But what he got instead was something much more powerful. He got himself back. Not the version that tried to be everything. Not the one who bent just to keep peace. Not the man who lived by her moods. But the man who remembered. He was never supposed to chase peace, he was supposed to become it. And when that clicked, everything shifted. He started walking different, not louder, not cockier, just more present. He no longer needed her validation, because he validated his own clarity, his own calm, his own knowing. And the next time he was tested by anyone, he didn't panic. He didn't explain himself into exhaustion. He just stayed still. And people felt it, some respected it. Some pulled away, some came closer. But none of that moved him off center, because once a man leads himself, he stops being manipulated by energy outside of him. He becomes the source, the signal, the anchor. And yes, Anna noticed, not just the absence, but the presence he returned with. She came back, not with grand promises, just curiosity, softness, a different tone. And this time Michael didn't lean in. He didn't rush to rebuild. He just stood there, open, still, deciding. Because when you master yourself, You no longer beg to be chosen, you choose from strength, from clarity, from peace. And whether she stayed or left, it didn't define him because he was already whole. That's the emotional payoff. You stop needing the person who hurt you to also be the one who heals you. You stop chasing the story you were sold and start writing the one that actually fits who you've become. And in that story, you don't lose yourself for love. You bring your full self to it. No masks, no fear, no chase, just presence. And if you've come this far still here, still listening, still breathing through every moment I described, then maybe you're not just a listener, you're the man who's about to lead, not just her, not just others, but yourself. And that kind of man, he doesn't get forgot. He gets followed, respected, remembered. So here's your invitation. Don't try to get her back. Get yourself back. And let her feel what it's like to stand in the presence of a man who finally remembers who he is.